Morning, everybody. This is Steve Halliday. We're just past the top of the hour here. Still a lot of people joining us, but we'll get started with the introductory stuff. So again, I'm Steve Halliday with the RAIN Alliance. Good morning, everyone. Today's webinar is from VDC Research, and it's the RAIN RFID Market Outlook. David Krebs with VDC Research will be giving the presentation today. The presentation is based around the new market research report that RAIN released very recently. So before we get going, we have a few housekeeping things to take care of. So first of all, I remind you that RAIN is committed to complying fully with all of the antitrust laws. And as such, we don't discuss prices, margins, discounts, suppliers, etc. We also have a policy on collaboration and work product in which we are all here for the sake of the industry, and we don't share confidential information, and we're polite and respect our fellow participants. You can read the full policies on the RAIN website at the URL on the screen right now. So RAIN has been holding webinars mostly every 2 weeks. We had a small delay in the middle there, but this will be our last webinar for 2020. We are starting to build together webinars for 2021. So we hope you've all enjoyed these webinars. If you haven't been able to attend them all and you'd like to learn more, you can go to our website and search under the resources webinars, and you will find copies of all of the webinars, including links to our YouTube page where many of the recordings are posted. So just to let you all know, we are recording this event, and it will be made available along with the presentation in a few days on the website. We will send everybody who is registered for the event an email with the links to get to those, the presentation and the video. So I remind you, you're all on mute. So if you have questions to David, you can post them to the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. You will see a button marked Q&A. Please type your questions in there to David. If you're having problems with the webinar or you have questions other than those to David, please put them in the chat section. You might have to click on the 3 dots more to see chat, but if you post them there, Paige is monitoring that and she will help you immediately. So again, questions to David in the Q&A section at the bottom, please. So just to remind everybody that RAIN is working with AIM to hold a virtual event. Engage Again will take place on the 9th and 10th of December. Registration is open. It's only $50 to attend, and there will be 2 full days of presentations along with access to the virtual exhibit hall. This will be a new experience for many of you. This is not a set of Zoom meetings. This will be a fully interactive virtual meeting. You will create your own avatar and you can walk around in the meeting and participate. You can sit in the auditorium and listen to the presentations or walk around the exhibit floor and talk to the exhibitors. So you can go to the website and you'll find the information to register in the banner at the top. And we look forward to seeing you on the 9th and 10th of December. So as I said, today's presentation is from David Krebs. David is with VDC Research. RAIN commissioned VDC Research to create this RAIN RFID market report. David is going to summarize and talk about the report. If you wish to purchase the report, you will find on our homepage, you will find a logo for the market research. You can click on that and it will take you straight to the description and the opportunity to purchase that report. So let's see, we're going to hand it over to David. I'm going to stop sharing. David is going to take over sharing. He's going to unmute himself and away we'll go. You are on mute, David.
Great, thank you, Steve. So hopefully that transition worked well and everyone can hear me and see the opening slide from my session.
We can hear you.
Excellent. So thanks to everyone who's on the bridge today. Look forward to sharing some highlights from the research that we have been conducting over the last couple of months in collaboration with the RAIN Alliance. As Steve mentioned, if you do have questions, please submit them via the chat window. I probably have about 30-35 minutes of content, so there should be ample time at the end of the session to address any of the questions that may come across. As I mentioned, what we are sharing is sort of a higher level overview of the research report. Obviously, there's a lot more detail to be found in the actual report. So just a quick agenda, if you might. Before I get into the findings, I do want to talk a little bit about the scope and the methodology and what ultimately was behind the research and how we went about conducting this research, and then provide you with some of our thinking about sort of growth outlook by category, by application, by region, as we came to understand them through this research. One of the things that certainly as we launched this engagement and as we got into the research, which we launched at the beginning of this year, clearly a very common sort of theme across all of the discussions was COVID-19 and the impact of COVID-19 on not only near-term demand but also some of the longer-term projections. And it was, for someone who's done this type of research for many years now, certainly presented some of the most challenging sort of environments and scenarios to really understand its impact, because it seemed like every day ushered in a new set of news, a new set of expectations and projections in terms of timelines and impact by industry. And now, several months later, we're still seemingly in the midst of things. So one of the things that we did do as a result of that, we did create sort of these scenario-based forecasts to accommodate some of the volatility that we are at least seeing in the in the near term over the course of certainly this year and probably next year or the next 18 months. So in terms of the actual scope and the methodology behind this research, from a technology scope perspective, this was specifically focused or exclusively focused on RAIN RFID products, and the product categories that we covered within the research included everything from tag ICs and reader ICs and reader modules to inlays to finish tags, as well as handheld and fixed position or stationary readers, and then finally also printer encoders. So those covered the sort of the key hardware segments, and for each of those, unit and revenue shipment forecasts are provided. I didn't include on this slide, but I should mention sort of the years for the content. The base year for the research is 2019, given that that's the last full calendar year, and then we have forecasts through 2024, so individual shipment expectations for each year between 2019 and 2024. We then broke that down by geo, so these are the primary geographic markets: North America, Central Latin America, India, and APAC, as well as, I don't have them all listed here, by industry or vertical market, in addition to application category, so things like inventory control, like work in process tracking, like logistics applications, etc. So all of that content is included in the research. In terms of the methodology, we certainly leaned on VDC's sort of long-standing coverage of auto ID markets broadly, automatic identification markets broadly, as well as research that we have done historically into the broader RFID landscape and more specifically in the RAIN RFID space as well. And then in addition to that, we conducted a series of in-depth interviews with organizations across the ecosystem, across the landscape. So that started with what we're classifying as sort of the hardware vendors, and that's everyone from IC to inlay to tag to reader to printer and encoder vendors, as well as solution providers and systems integrators, in addition to a handful of vendors of leading end users as well as industry associations. And one final point is that we worked in close collaboration with the RAIN RFID board in sharing a lot of our discussion guides and early assumptions and findings in putting together the final research. The research was conducted over the course of the past 6 months. It kicked off earlier on in Q1 of this year and led through the summer months in terms of the interviews that we conducted. So starting at a fairly high level in terms of the factors that we really see driving the RAIN RFID opportunity, and I've listed sort of a handful of them here. And the first one, I don't want to sort of overemphasize cost because I think a lot of times we get caught into just looking at cost as either a barrier or a driver of RFID and RAIN RFID adoption. But certainly we have seen some significant reductions in cost of both tags and reader infrastructure that have opened up the market significantly. And so while for the highest volume applications, if you will, you're seeing tag costs around 5 cents plus or minus, there's a pretty wide disparity in terms of actual costs of tags and readers, depending on packaging and depending on the application. But we do certainly see advances in production and fabrication processes, demand-driven economies of scale for prices to further come down, to further decline as adoption also continues to scale. So we are projecting across all of the product categories a cost erosion in the neighborhood of about 5%, give or take. Which we do believe will also open up new markets. One of the certainly leading use cases and adoption scenarios for RAIN RFID has been in the apparel segment. That has been widely documented for sure, and we continue to see wide scale adoption here. And what we have also seen, and that certainly enables and is driving even greater scale, is the adoption of source tagging capabilities by some of the leading brand owners. So what's happening is, and this is clearly necessary, is at the point of manufacture, at the point of packaging, we're seeing brand owners apply tags in various configurations so that downstream they don't have to be applied, and really the full benefit of the RFID solution across the ecosystem from assembly, manufacturing, distribution, and then finally in the retail and customer-facing settings can be realized. So source tagging efforts by brand owners is something that we've certainly seen as a very strong catalyst and in driving scale and driving value for this technology. The next one, and this will be an interesting one over the next couple of years, is the build out or the continued build out of what we're classifying sort of fixed reader solutions. Currently, or historically at least, the majority of readers that have been adopted and deployed have been mostly handheld readers. And that's a function of demand certainly in the apparel segment, the ease of use, and sort of the lower cost of that form factor of reader. But we're starting to witness, as opportunities expand and open up in markets like logistics, in markets like manufacturing, in markets like QSR and food services, demand for or greater demand for fixed readers. And the fixed reader infrastructure development or deployment, we think is going to be a significant development over the course of the next, from the next couple of years. So this is going to, or this build out of this fixed reader infrastructure across retail, across logistics, across manufacturing environments, we believe will substantially expand application opportunities, and will also allow organizations to do what we're calling sort of virtualization of their operations, and allow them to drive more advanced simulation and more advanced analytics within their businesses. So we really do see that as a very significant development that we'll be tracking over the next couple of years. The fourth one, and this is in the next slide, I'll share a little bit more detail as to where we see this happening, is this notion of use case expansion. RAIN RFID success historically has, as I said, has been very closely tied to the apparel use case and the inventory control and stock management use case in retail environments, and that will continue to be certainly a significant factor moving forward. But we are seeing a number of things happening here. First of all, there's sort of a seeding impact of the retail market with these apparel or inventory control applications, is allowing retailers to expand the use cases of RAIN RFID within their operations. So that's trending to things like loss prevention, even point of sale applications. So we're seeing sort of a proliferation or a building out of use cases in some of these more entrenched markets. Certainly we're seeing category expansion. Apparel, footwear, sportswear has been sort of the focal point so far. Now we're seeing category expansion in retail into other goods, such as home goods, such as cosmetics, such as watches and jewelry items. So again, leveraging infrastructure that is in place already to expand into additional use cases. And then finally, also, there's no shortage of application opportunities and vertical markets where RAIN RFID has potential and is being considered and deployed. So new vertical markets beyond retail, we're certainly seeing. I mentioned a couple of them already. One certainly has been, that we've been hearing about or more about recently, has been quick serve restaurants. Another one certainly is also in the logistics sphere for on the pallet and tray level, and also on the parcel level. So there are a number of efforts underway there in manufacturing environments, in particular in automotive, for example, for a variety of work in process and other types of applications. So the use cases for this technology has been and continues to proliferate for sure. And then finally, while COVID certainly has created headwinds and created delays in decision making, if you will, around some of these segments. Probably the easiest example for that is the impact of COVID on airline travel and thus the opportunity for baggage tracking and handling applications. But COVID as a catalyst was also a theme that certainly came up in a number of discussions that we had. And what we're talking about here is what we saw, especially in the retail market, and I'll share in a couple of slides some survey data around this, is retailers really had to pivot in terms of how they're engaging with customers, how they're allowing for sort of greater fulfillment options through different channels, And we did see a very close correlation between retailers that did well in these scenarios and retailers that struggled. And oftentimes their ability to pivot, their ability to be agile had a lot to do with the way that their operations ran and the visibility that they had into those operations, which oftentimes is very closely correlated to to their inventory management capabilities. So we certainly saw that. We saw that COVID certainly accelerating contactless types of engagements. We certainly saw digital transformation efforts across a number of industrial and logistics areas, accelerate, if you will, as a result of the impact of this current pandemic that everyone is navigating. So those are again higher level, but some of the themes that certainly sort of consistently made their way through the discussions that we had. One of the things that that certainly came up in a lot of the discussions is we're really still very much at the infancy, if you will, of the opportunity when considering penetration, attach rates, and sort of this notion of what is taggable and what is the the total available market of quote unquote taggable items. So I've taken a little bit of liberties with some of these numbers here, and I'll sort of point out them out. But I think the bottom line that we're hearing is that and that certainly drove into a lot of our assumptions around growth and growth outlook, is that there is massive and significant upside potential across a number of use cases, especially as the sort of the proven value of RFID or RAIN RFID investments that we're starting to see in some of the numbers that we're starting to be shared in a lot of the early adoption use cases get socialized and get better understood. So these are a handful of the categories where we certainly are starting to see some traction. So I'll provide a little bit of commentary on each of them. The first one, and certainly the largest one in terms of total number of items or annual items, is in the food space. And here we're really talking in terms of actual items, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 trillion items on an annual basis. Now, are those 2 trillion items all available today or over the course of our forecast period? No, there's certainly, especially here, cost is these are typically from a margin standpoint, very margin compressed items. But we are starting to see in some segments of the food business opportunities for RAIN RFID to emerge. So the attach rate today is obviously fairly low or quite minuscule in terms of the the total available opportunity. Where we're probably seeing again the greatest demand today is really in the way that quick serve restaurants are operating and their interest in tagging, and here it's really more around the tray level, if you will, but tagging trays of frozen foods and of now increasingly focus on fresh foods that are coming throughout their operations. So food traceability, certainly efforts around the Food Safety and Modernization Act are driving certainly acute interest in finding ways to better manage these processes. So when you're looking at it from a volume potential, this is really more of a lower tag volume, higher reader infrastructure opportunity moving forward, especially in the QSR space. But it's one that is certainly starting to open up. The next one is around parcels and really parcel delivery. So today, there's about 90 billion parcels that are delivered on an annual basis worldwide. A very small percentage are being affixed with RFID or RAIN RFID solutions, mostly around sort of very specialty type items that are being delivered that have either high value or some other type of regulatory controls or provisions around them. But we are certainly starting to see that change. So there is a trial that is going on in Brazil that is sponsored by the UPU, which is the Universal Postal Union, which is a sort of an agency of the United Nations, and they have selected basically Brazil Correios as their guinea pig and there's sort of a plan over the next couple of years to roll out across about 200 postal facilities, several thousand readers, with the potential to tag 100% of about 400 million parcels that are delivered in Brazil on an annual basis. Some of those timelines have been impacted by COVID and have been scaled back a little bit. And in terms of the next year, we're probably anticipating about 10% penetration. But again, that's a sort of a very high profile use case that we're starting to see happen here. And then in the overall sort of e-commerce vis-a-vis logistics or traditional logistics providers, there's certainly a lot more competition that we're seeing between those, and so there everyone's looking for sort of the smallest improvement in productivity and throughput, especially with some of the volumes and the capacity constraints that these organizations are facing today. So we do anticipate here as well, certainly a build out of this technology in their facilities. Apparel and footwear, this is one that has today a very high penetration rate, but even with the success and the adoption in this space, it's still only about 16 or between 15 and 20% penetration or attach rate today. So still a fairly significant upside, and we've seen certainly in terms of the benefits that we see organizations realize, especially today as they have looked to pivot to fulfill from store and provide contactless type of sales opportunities. Those that have invested in RAIN RFID have been able to do so probably more seamlessly than others, and that certainly has come through. But in this segment, we're also seeing, as I said before, the sort of the build out of or the expansion into other types of applications leveraging these investments. And here again, loss prevention and point of sale are sort of the two obvious ones that have come up. Cosmetics represents a sort of an expansion category amongst retailers, especially department stores that that are looking beyond apparel and footwear into other areas where they can benefit from this technology. So we're starting to see certainly increased interest here. That represents another 120 billion units on an annual basis. So an area where we do anticipate over the next couple of years to see some traction. The airline baggage one is in addition to the apparel use case, is probably one that has received sort of a lot of attention, especially after the IATA made their recommendation, not their mandate, but their recommendation to adopt RAIN-based RFID solutions or RAIN RFID solutions for baggage handling. Now, clearly, we've seen a very significant impact in terms of passenger volume in this space. That will rebound, but it will take some time. Where we are seeing activity today is, or I guess maybe the silver lining, if you even want to look at it that way, is that given the reduced sort of traffic that airports and airlines are seeing, it does provide them a window of opportunity to go in and make the infrastructure investments and upgrades that would otherwise be difficult to do while they are operating. So certainly not everyone is doing so, but we are seeing some organizations that are sort of taking this lull, if you will, and using that to build out their infrastructure. One thing that I will say, that even though the focus has been here on the sort of the baggage handling aspect and sort of prevention of lost bags and dealing with that issue, I mean, those numbers have come down quite significantly, and I think the airlines and the airports that realize that the value of these solutions really extends well beyond that use case and really are more focused on sort of the customer service aspects are the ones that have been successful and are being successful with these investments. So I think that sort of the customer service, customer engagement opportunity that RAIN RFID technology has presented has really differentiated, we believe, and provided sort of even greater ROI for some of those early investments. Automotive is another one that we have seen clearly a fairly low attach rate today, but we are starting to see some increase in demand as we're seeing shifts, for example, in build to order automotive production and use cases for everything from inbound parts to managing recalls and reverse logistics to doing parts verification through the assembly process are all areas where we're seeing greater opportunity and greater demand. And then finally, in logistics, some overlap in the parcel space, but even beyond traditional parcel-based shipment tracking, just overall logistics operations. And so we're seeing sort of shifts again from the closed loop to the open loop. We're seeing greater demand for, especially in large logistics facilities, large distribution centers, large, even manufacturing facilities, the need for location-based data and information. And we're seeing passive technology. Historically, that has been the domain of more active or battery-powered RFID, but we're seeing sort of the application of RAIN RFID for internal sort of location applications as another sort of use case. So just looking at this through a regional lens, and I'll be the first to admit this is a little bit difficult to do, given that we're talking about global brands, global supply chains, and aligning sort of demand with the regional market is oftentimes a little bit difficult, especially when source tagging happens in Asia, and for example, and sort of the retail use case might happen in Europe or North America. But generally speaking, if we wanted to sort of oversimplify things today, majority of, I would say that certainly the more sophisticated application and investments around RAIN RFID have happened in North America and in Europe, which represents almost 80% of demand or of spend, if you will. And then Asia, which is in terms of sort of the scale of opportunity, it certainly presents some of the greatest upside potential. Is today about 1/5 of the market. And then in Latin America, although we are seeing some really interesting dynamics, at least pre-COVID, in Latin America, in particular in Brazil, but also in Chile and Mexico and other country markets, today is a fairly small percent of actual use. What we're seeing regionally, I mean, certainly there is commonality across use cases across the globe, but at the same time, there are certainly some nuances. So in North America, I would say we've seen some of the more sophisticated, I guess I would group Europe in here as well, some of the more sophisticated use cases. Whereas Europe has benefited from a lot more vertically integrated retailers and the ability to scale much easier, if you will, than the sort of the more traditional wholesale model that is prevalent in North America. We're certainly seeing some very large deployments in some very well-known retail brands in North America. I can't name names here, but even over the last year, some very significant developments and investments happening. So here we're seeing everything from again, sort of the traditional department store driven apparel and inventory control, stock management applications through logistics and QSR and others as some of the key sectors driving demand in North America. In Europe, much of the same. I would add automotive there, where probably the European-based automotive OEMs are certainly showing some of the more innovative approaches and investments around RAIN RFID in terms of their production processes. And as I said before, I think the nature of sort of the vertical integration of some of the retailers there has allowed just for much easier scalability of RFID throughout their value chain. But at the same time, with a lot of brands today, investing in source tagging and really seeing, in the past there used to be the notion of, well, if I'm going to pay for applying this tag, I want to see or share that value somehow, or at least see some of the data, and that has been sort of a point of resistance. Brands are now seeing that the tagged items are just performing that much better in a lot of their retail environments. So even without greater data sharing between retailers and brand owners, the adoption is certainly being facilitated by that. In APAC, it's a bit of a mixed bag, but certainly between sort of high growth emerging and more established markets. We do see some very large growth in China and India, just by default, based on the size and scale of those countries and the size and scale of those populations. Clearly in the past, in segments like retail, inventory control was handled with labor, right? So access to cheap labor was sort of the way that retailers would traditionally have managed, sort of in-store inventory control issues. But that is certainly changing, and we're starting to see that come about. And then there's certainly some very high profile, use cases that are emerging in Japan around convenience store initiatives that has some very daunting goals and targets. So we'll be closely looking at how those develop. Certainly easier said than done, but again, it is initiatives like those and investments like those that will start to open up the market in a number of different use cases. And then just quickly on Latin America, again, very dynamic market. Just we've seen a lot of sort of startup mentality especially around organizations in Brazil. So we've seen investment in local infrastructure, so investments in solution providers and label converters to develop sort of in region conversion capabilities, and really where the demand is showing up is, I would say, mostly in the retail segment. We're certainly seeing with the UPU and Brazil Post trial, that stand out as well. But most of that demand has been, I would say, largely concentrated in sort of the more retail inventory control driven applications. But again, a fairly diverse set of opportunities across the globe. So I have a couple of slides that are going to look at sort of look at the outlook, and this is obviously always open to interpretation around, okay, what's driving demand, what's driving growth, what's driving adoption, especially in today's market environments, and that's why we came up with some different scenarios. So what you aren't seeing here is the in-between years and sort of what's happening in 2020 and 2021. I do have a slide that shows a little bit of that in terms of growth rates on the next slide. But I think the takeaway here is, as we look at the out years for base case, best case, and worst case, clearly there are differences. But if you look at base case and worst case scenarios, where worst case we're clearly seeing contraction near term wise and and a more substantial near-term slowdown as a result of the economic fallout from COVID. Where the market arrives at by 2024 is not too different. Best case is certainly fairly significantly higher, but are both base case and worst case end up around 50 billion tags by 2024, up from close to 18 million in 2019. So still fairly fairly significant sort of growth outlooks. Again, just the near term scenario is more impacted. So I don't want to review all of sort of the assumptions that went into these growth models and growth forecasts. Certainly the upside potential and sort of the application expansion is in terms of quote unquote taggable items and attach rates today, and the types of categories where we're seeing investment happen is certainly influencing our longer term view of this market, and is generally a very positive one. When we look at sort of the years leading into 2019 and the growth and the investments that were happening, they were all very there were certainly some ups and downs, but generally very, very significant and strong double-digit year-over-year growth leading into 2019. So that remains our outlook long-term wise. Double-digit growth from some 20s, potentially in the 30s in terms of year-over-year. Certainly, there's volatility, and that will impact demand and investments over the course of, I would say, the next 12 to 18 months. I think one of the biggest questions that we have, given that there's a large share of the market is in the apparel, is the shift to online and opening up of traditional brick and mortar retailers. So again, apparel retailers that have invested in RAIN RFID solutions to drive better inventory management practices, to reduce their investments in safety stocks and the like, to have better inventory control, have tended to do well. But it's certainly it certainly has impacted that space as we're looking at the inventory from spring, summer, fall seasons and how that's being managed. So the shift to online and sort of the lasting impact of that will certainly be something that we will need to follow. COVID as a catalyst on the flip side, again, is something that we are starting to see as well, whether it's through contactless, whether it's through again reinforcing the value of omni-channel and different fulfillment capabilities. It's certainly happening. And all of these models do anticipate a post-COVID rebound. The question is sort of the timing around that. So even, again, I'll jump to the next slide here, sort of even in our, worst case scenario where we're essentially predicting, sort of flat year-over-year growth from 2019 to 2021, there is pent-up demand that we're factoring into that model. So some of the highest growth is going to come on the heels of that sort of flat performance through next year. So that'll go from, again, 0.4%, and this is for tags specifically, to about 40% CAGR from 2021 to 2024. Whereas the growth outlooks for sort of the base case and the best case scenarios are a little bit more consistent. Looking at sort of the next couple of years versus the out years. So we certainly are seeing, and we certainly do anticipate a rebound as a result of some pent-up demand. And I'll show you, I think the next slide after this is a depiction of what happened in the last recession on auto ID investments and what type of a rebound we did see. So on the reader side, I mean, the story is fairly similar just in terms of growth. Again, in the sense that we are seeing, healthy demand historically that has, when looking at reader infrastructure, it has been, I would say, more weighted towards lower cost handheld readers that these organizations are more familiar with. And again, that has had some correlation to the apparel in-store use case. Even in those in-store use cases, we are starting to see now fixed reader infrastructures being developed. One of the challenges in the past was with fixed reader infrastructure in the store was, what was it reading? And was it reading inventory that was actually on the store or in the back room? And being able to manage those different sort of locations with the infrastructure was a challenge that is, or has been a challenge that is being overcome. But in looking at sort of the higher growth emerging use cases in QSR, in logistics, in manufacturing environments, those tend to be more fixed reader driven. So the balance is shifting as a result of what we saw in this research. Is certainly starting to shift towards fixed infrastructure across not every use case for sure, but certainly a lot of the higher growth ones. And so again, the slide that I had indicated before, what happened in the last recession or the Great Recession, in the last turn of the decade, between 2007 and 2010. So leading into it, and again, this is for all auto ID, so this is not unique to RFID specifically. This covers all of sort of the data capture technologies that we track. But leading into it, we saw fairly robust and healthy growth in terms of double-digit investments, and then we saw 2 years of contraction. First, about 10% or almost 10%, and then in 2009, a fairly significant contraction. But what we did see coming out of it, again, and this is sort of the point I wanted to illustrate, is a very healthy rebound based on sort of the pent-up demand. I think this is a little bit different in terms of today's scenario. Obviously, at the end of the day, access to capital and access to funds to support and secure these investments is always going to be challenging when facing sort of economic uncertainty and recessionary sort of periods. But at the same time, again, and here the next 2 slides I'll use to sort of make this point for me, is we are starting to see transformation happening as well in the way that organizations are behaving as a result or in response to COVID-19. So I don't want to, on the flip side, I don't want to, paint a sort of a doom and gloom scenario, but also I don't want to overcompensate and say, this is actually, the best thing that could have happened to the industry, because it certainly is not, and has created challenges. But we are seeing, shifts in customer engagement models. And while this question isn't specifically related to RAIN RFID investments or the potential for RAIN RFID investments, we have seen organizations that have, especially, enabled, click and collect and BOPUS types of capabilities, contactless payment capabilities. These are all, to be able to do that and to do that well, because we've certainly seen what happens when it doesn't go well. You really have to have a good understanding of your business and where things are. And if you're committing to selling an item to a customer and committing to having it available in a particular location or a particular store, you better be sure it is available in that right size and know where it is. So we've seen a very big disparity in click and collect gone well and gone bad. And generally the sort of the key ingredients, if you will, to those that go well have a lot to do with operational excellence, but also very strong visibility. This next slide again this came from a survey that we fielded over the summer that was separate to the this RAIN RFID research efforts, but I thought they would be good illustration for this discussion, at least at a high level. And again, we were asking how well-equipped organizations were in their response to COVID-19 and whether or not this was sort of driving investments or what impact this was having on investments. around auto ID, around mobile solutions to support operations. And I think probably there's a little bit of over exuberance in the data here, but certainly organizations value the benefits that they're realizing through these digital solutions. I think digital transformation, Industry 4.0 efforts. I mean, we've talked to a lot of industrial organizations and the way that they're sort of managing their workforce, their way that they're managing their businesses. A lot of these investments and these initiatives that we're certainly under development have sort of shot to the top of the list of priorities and are getting a lot more attention from the C-suite. I won't read through the entire quote here, but H&M, obviously a very large apparel retailer, and one that historically wasn't that great when it came to adoption of digital solutions and managing an inventory. There have been a number of articles written about waste around inventory by some retailers. They've now sort of certainly embraced, and while they are certainly in facing challenging times, what they are also saying is that they're seeing that the pandemic has caused changes in customer behavior and will accelerate the digitization of their industry. I won't read the rest of the quote, but again, I think that we're starting to see a lot more of that, and we've seen that also from other organizations that have made these investments and have enabled their businesses to again just to react and respond more efficiently or in a more agile way. So just a final point. I know we have a number of questions. And so I do want to be mindful of the time. It probably took a little bit longer than I thought I would. But again, and some of these points are or have already been made, so I don't have to reinforce them too significantly. But really, I think we are entering a second wave, if you will, or a new wave of RAIN RFID adoption. I think that certainly there is some volatility in sort of the near-term scenarios. I certainly don't want to suggest that there isn't, but we are starting to see also just the proliferation of opportunity and use cases that even a couple of years ago were perhaps talked about, but really weren't necessarily being invested in. So breaking the mold is certainly one of the things that we're starting to see. Ushering in new or breaking it or introducing new application and use case expansion is I would say one of the key themes. Technology enhancements, that's everything from certainly taking even more cost out of these solutions, but also improving sensitivity, improving read range, improving yields, improving sort of the capabilities, to introduce things like accurate location solutions using RAIN RFID technology. Seeing some really, really interesting innovation happening there that again is further opening up the application opportunity. Certainly the fixed reader infrastructure, we've mentioned that a number of times, and that sort of enabling the virtualization of operations, I think is a very interesting theme moving forward. And then visibility as competitive currency. And again, this is across virtually every or any sector, but enabling real-time decision-making with scale as a result of a clear understanding of what's going on in your business. And certainly there are many technologies, there are other technologies that can do that, but RAIN RFID has certainly a very strong history and track record in doing exactly that. So that's my sort of the key points that I was looking to make. Just quickly on VDC Research, for those of you who are not familiar with us, we have we're sort of a multi-practice research organization. Auto ID and data capture and enterprise mobility and connected work are the two that I'm responsible for, but then we do a fair amount of work in industrial automation and sensor solutions, as well as IoT and embedded technologies. And if you're interested in learning more about what we do and the services we provide, feel free to reach out for sure with this contact information. But at this point, I'm gonna throw it back over to you, Steve, so that we can get through some of the questions that have been posted. But certainly thank you for everyone for your time today.
Thank you, David. Very informative. We do have some questions here that we can get to. We are running a little late, but that's okay. So a couple of the questions revolve around pharma and healthcare. You didn't mention them on your slide 5.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to comment on how active they are and whether this is a significant area for us?
Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up. And as I was putting this this content together, that was sort of in the back of my mind as well. We are certainly seeing in pharma, in healthcare as well, certainly efforts around drug serialization and driving more unique information about or identification of pharmacological products. So a lot of that today has been or is being satisfied by line of sight technology. So a lot of those efforts have navigated towards data matrix based solutions and sort of the read infrastructure to support that. But we certainly are seeing similar types of opportunity for RAIN RFID solutions to satisfy some of those use cases. In hospital settings, we certainly are seeing for patient engagement, for sort of RFID-based RAIN RFID-based wristbands, for lab management. We are starting to see and also for location applications, starting to see certainly the application opportunity evolve as well. But I think sort of the efforts around I forget the acronym, the DSCMA or the Drug Safety and Act or Serialization Act. I think that those are also while still more line of sight driven today, are also driving sort of greater focus around the need for unique identification of items. And there are a variety of technologies that can support that, including RAIN RFID.
Okay, thank you, David. You actually faded out there at the end. Let's see, we have a couple of other questions. One that perhaps I should answer is, do you have any numbers for printer encoders? If you are interested in the market research report, if you go to the RAIN homepage, you will find links to both the market research and the Engage Again event. If you follow the link to the market research, you will find a complete summary of everything that's included in the report. So you'll be able to get a lot more information on what's available in the report. And one final question before we leave, questions about dual frequency tags, RAIN and NFC combined. Where the RAIN part is used for logistics and the NFC part for end user consumer use with smartphones. Would you like to just comment quickly on that?
So we've seen a couple of, we've seen certainly some technology development around creating sort of these dual use tags, both with NFC and also certainly with sort of traditional loss prevention technologies. So from a technological standpoint, it's certainly possible. From a business use case standpoint, there it becomes a little bit trickier. So we've seen, it's a fairly, it becomes a fairly expensive proposition, when you're starting to combine NFC and RAIN RFID into sort of a single solution. Certainly, there's a lot of similarities in terms of the way those two technologies work, and again, from a technological side, it's feasible. The question is, does it make sense, and what's the use case by cost? But we've certainly seen some really interesting innovation and product development happen around both that as well as sort of the combination in the loss prevention space.
And one last question. Can you comment more on the move to fixed reader and the specific use cases?
Well, the use cases are many. What we're seeing is with fixed readers, again, we put it slightly different. With handheld readers, there's always that human involvement, if you will, that sets off the trigger to read something. Fixed reader infrastructure is by default it's there and it's constantly sort of pinging. So where we see that those use cases show up is starting also in retail settings, certainly around fixed readers in smart dressing rooms, fixed readers as a portal at entry points and exit points, and then even fixed readers to cover entire retail spaces. Now, again, it's still challenging from a sort of cost and performance perspective, where that has been the challenge, at least for the retail use case, and that's why a lot of retailers have sort of favored handheld readers. But when you look at QSR, that's really almost entirely fixed reader infrastructure that would be doing the reading of the trays, the food trays, and the cartons. And when you're looking at in warehouse environments and manufacturing facilities, a lot of those use cases would be driven by fixed, certainly by fixed readers. In baggage handling applications, that's largely a fixed reader type of application. So it's really it's really pretty broad. What I will say is that the investments in fixed reader infrastructure, I think, will also allow organizations to do or to provide sort of that virtualization and allow them to do a lot more analytics and simulation of operations than they wouldn't be able to do with sort of traditional handheld readers.
All right, well, we've gone over the hour and I see that our audience is starting to leave us. So thank you again, David. That was a great session. Lots of information for people there. If you're interested in the market research report, you can go to the RAIN website and you will find the market research logo there. You can get much more information on what's included in the report. There is a discount for RAIN members. We encourage you to sign up and buy the report. And just the last reminder, don't forget to register for the Engage Again virtual conference coming up on 9th and 10th of December. You may have seen the press release that went out this morning announcing our keynote speaker is from NASA, and he will talk about the use of the technology on the International Space Station. So thank you all for attending today. We look forward to hearing from you soon and seeing you at the Engage Again conference. Thanks, everybody.